used to be a hacker. I was basically hired to break everything I could in companies, and invariably the next question would be like, okay, so how do we prevent people like you from getting in? If you want to be a good founder, you have to let it consume your entire life. I just don't think there's any other path, to be honest. One day you're just poking around, next day like half of the country's infrastructure is down because you've been overly excited and poking around.
Welcome to the In the Pit podcast. I'm your host, Cody Schneider. Today we are hosting Bryan Onel. He is the co-founder of Oneleet. They've gone from 0 to 7 million ARR in 20 months. Absolutely insane. What we're going to talk about on today's show is everything they're doing to facilitate that growth, what you should be thinking about from a cybersecurity standpoint for your startup, and why all the incumbents out there are totally full of it. He's going to also share the tactical things he's doing to create conversation within a community around his product to help build brand and facilitate new inbound leads. As always, the show is brought to you by Swell AI. It's brought to you by Draft Horse AI and brought to you by landingcat.com. All right, let's get started with today's show. Bryan, what's good, man? How you doing?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing really good. How are you?
Man, I know it's late there right now. You're based out of Amsterdam. I imagine you're just dead from the day, but hopefully we can suck some energy out of you and get some knowledge from you. So I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. These are my peak hours. This is when I usually do sales calls, so we're all good.
I love it. Awesome, man. So for a little bit of background, do you have 3 bullet points to orient the audience of what you're doing? Just for a little bit of context, you're building this company called Oneleet. You guys are funded, basically a Vanta competitor, and absolutely crushing it. I've seen the data just because I'm friends with your head of growth, Cody, who's also been on the show like multiple times, so people will know him. But yeah, I'd love to get a couple background bullet points, and then we could jump into the meat.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Yeah, so I am the CEO and one of 3 founders in Oneleet. We've been around for about 3 years now. Before starting this company, I used to be a hacker. I was basically hired to break everything I could in companies, and invariably the next question would be like, okay, so how do we prevent people like you from getting in? And that really led to this journey of continuously building the tools and everything that companies needed to defend themselves. And at a certain point, I felt, you know what? I'm done building this for others. I'm going to build this for myself. That's how the company started. I asked my best friend, I asked my wife if they wanted to join me. We've been happily building since, got into YC in the summer 22 batch. And yeah, the ride's been crazy since. That's the story in a nutshell.
Amazing, man. I love it. So wait, so you're building with, you said your best friend and your wife is who your partners are? That's wild. Okay, so I work with my girlfriend. Like we're constantly doing this. Always challenges is like where the boundaries are work life. I imagine probably similar stuff, but this is something that I'm still trying to figure out as well. So what does that look like? How do you like differentiate? You're doing the funded route, right? So you're sprinting a marathon. So it's different rules of the game, but curious how you think about that or approach that, or if you educate me on how to do this better for myself.
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say.
It's a great question. I get a lot of people asking me like, how do you make it work? And I think people assume that there's a lot of drama involved. The truth is that it actually makes my life a lot easier. And I'm sure that's the case for my best friend and my wife as well, or Anik. The thing is, I previously worked with people I didn't know very well, that I did have a lot of friction with. And I think that if you're all aligned on the idea that this is going to take a lot of work and basically you don't have any free time, I think that's when it works. I think when you have this expectation that, at PM you clock out and then you come over for dinner and then you spend the evening together, if that's the expectation, that's where things go sideways. But as long as your partner knows what they're in for up front and they're actually part of the journey, I think that really does a lot of good. But one thing I will say is that there's no real separation. At the dinner table, it's about the company. Just before going to bed, it's always about the company. It consumes everything. But I think that there's no other way. If you want to be a good founder, you have to let it consume your entire life. I just don't think there's any other path, to be honest. But maybe I'm doing this the unhealthy way. Who knows?
No, I'm in the same belief, or same in the same zone as you. I think the thing that people forget is you need that energy in the beginning. You're breaking the laws of gravity, right? The laws of physics. Yep. And like the only way to get that company off the ground is that obsession and to really make this thing pump. And yeah, we try to designate time. We call it like low power hour, where we're just like go and it's like offline, maybe listen to records and drink a glass of wine or something like that, and get that into the day as like a scheduled time, which is honestly ridiculous, but I think it's necessary. For most founders, you hear the same thing. It's like, my company wouldn't have made it if we weren't obsessing over it in every detail constantly throughout the day. So, yeah.
We have something like that too as well, actually. I don't tell people about this. I'm not sure people within Oneleet know about this, but my co-founders and I, we often play PUBG on the
Oh,
iPad.
no way. Awesome. I'm a big AOE fan. So that's like what I grew up
nice.
playing was, so I'm like deep in the community. My younger brother is so good. He rips. And so I play with him. I get my ass whooped, but it's fun as hell. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's completely fine. It's really our way to de-stress and just get it all out. That we also use it as executive hour where we discuss everything. And because there's 3 of us and we play in teams of 4, there's always this random 4th guy. And we just talk about business and numbers and shit. And he's like, the fuck is going on here? This is so weird. And in the meantime, we're just behind you, motherfucker, get that fucker. It's like, it's really intense, but we need it. And it's our way to really decompress.
No, I love it. I can just imagine every Vanta salesperson is now going to pick up PUBG and hope they get put in the lobby with you to hear the data.
Yes.
I love it. Love it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome, man. Cool. So just to take a step back. So you guys, Amanda's a lot of pen testing stuff. How did you get in that world? What was the kind of the first thing that brought you into? I feel like every person that kind of has your profile, like that hacker background, they all started out with, figured out I could hack MySpaces or something like this. And then I created this worm bot and suddenly it was on like a million different machines. And then that just leads to spiral. But I'm curious what your journey looked like that kind of brought you into this whole world.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that whenever people ask me that question, I think there's this expectation that it's all been computers, right? The truth of the matter is actually my dad is a locksmith. He used to work as a locksmith, and it was one of the foremost experts in the world that could open safes nobody else could. He invented new techniques and he created a buttload of tools that are still used to this day. And I used to come with him. So I learned a lot about locks and how to open them. And it's a very strange world. It's a very small world. Not a lot of people do this. So it's a community and you pick up on a certain mindset and a certain way of thinking. And this is something that really rubbed off on me when I was young. My dad was always questioning everything. Like, if there's a rule, okay, what's the idea behind the rule? Why follow it? If you live according to the spirit of the rule,
you're basically built to be a founder. Like, you had no other life choice.
Exactly. This was always going to happen. So yeah, I grew up just breaking shit, and just wherever I went, I was like, can I make this thing do this? And my dad taught me, you can make anything, do whatever you want. There are no limits to this. And there was this weird thing just after college where I was at this exhibition and there was this company, they were hiring hackers, and he was like, you sound like a hacker. And I'm like, yeah, no, I've broken into a bunch of things. Would you like a job as a hacker? And I was like, that's a thing? He's like, yeah, but pays well. And this is now about 11, 12 years ago when pen testing wasn't as popular a profession. Barely anyone knew what it was. So I grabbed that opportunity with both hands and I was like, let's do this. Immediately got to work for the Dutch government. And so suddenly you're testing national infrastructure. One day you're just poking around. Next day, like half of the country's infrastructure is down because you've been overly excited and poking around. And this initial excitement that you have as a pen tester, it fades, but you always find new gigs to get that high again.
Yeah,
and
totally. I was just about to ask if it's like a high that you're chasing each time that you're doing it.
All the time. Day one.
Is there other parts of your life where you get that similar high, or is this like the only one? Like, I found, so I'm in the action sports community. Like, I do growth. That's like what I'm most interested in. And as soon as I figure out an arbitrage, I'm like, oh God, we can exploit this to basically make the company grow. It's like this, you feel this rush, and it's like similar to if you're skiing or one of these things. So I'm curious always if the people that get these highs off this, if there's other things in your life besides PUBG that also makes you have those feelings. So
tons of things. Honestly, I don't do a lot of pen testing anymore, but I feel like I hack things every single day, whether it's growth or whether it's, product. Hacking is just about finding more effective ways in unexpected ways that nobody could or would see. And then you just do it. So with growth, I think of tools and I write scripts and I go, I don't think anybody's ever tried this. And then we just do it. To give you a few examples, like when early in my career, I wanted to get more offers for jobs, right? I wanted to do that thing where you hop from job to job, you increase your pay. So what I did was I essentially created, and back in the day it was much easier, created like, I don't know, like 50 LinkedIn accounts. And I had all of those visit like every profile of the companies I wanted to be seen by. And these people were like, why is this dude looking at me? And they would send a message to that profile. And then I would be like, yeah, I'm not looking for a job, but I know this dude who is. And that way I had this whole machine running, and that's how I started getting quite a lot of offers. And it was this weird thing where I was like, at some point I had so much being offered. I didn't really want to say yes to any of them anymore. I was like, yeah, I'm good for now. I'm just going to say a ridiculous number, and that's going to make them just go away. And I said a ridiculously high number, and this guy was like, "Yeah, okay, that sounds fine." I was
What
like,
was the number?
Back at the day, it wasn't even that much, but for me, it was so much. It was $100 per hour, and before that, my first job, it was like $20 per hour or something. It was like,
Totally.
what the hell? And after that, it just gets higher.
And you're in the
higher.
Netherlands at this point. That's a crazy salary, and I think that like, a lot of people in the U.S. don't understand like what the average salary is. So my friend, for example, he lives in Berlin. He's like a product manager there, in working at a funded company. By all accounts, like it's successful. I think he's doing like 55,000 euros a year, and they're like, that's like good money. Like he's living a good life on that, which is
very good salary here in Europe.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that changed my life.
Oh, it's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so you worked at these companies. How long were you in like civilian life before you went into, okay, we're going to go and build our own thing? Were you always building companies on the side? It sounds like you probably had side projects or this type of thing that was always going on. But
yeah, I always had things going on, tiny businesses I would contribute to or projects that I would just build out. I think I tried to start 2 companies before, both just completely bombed. But it was always like, I didn't really go all in back in the day. And I think it was a fear thing. I was scared of failure, so I just stuck to the comfort of having a job. But I was always moving towards starting a company and going all in, really. But yeah, I did this for about a decade. Penetration testing, security. There were periods where I took a sabbatical here and there, but on and off, that's about as long as I did it. And one of the things that I see very frequently in security happen to me as well, the job is very intense. People expect you to know everything about everything. So the result is that you work regular work days, and then after hours, you're reading up just to maintain that perception of this guy knows his shit. And the days were actually probably as long as my days are now. And many pen testers have this problem. And as a result, many of them burn out and they feel like, fuck this, and they just quit. And it was at my last job where I went through something similar. My then cat had just died, and I love my cat so much. I was emotional. I told them, like, guys, I just can't. I just have to take 1 or 2 weeks off. And they were dismissive about it. And I was like, fuck this. I want to work on my terms. If I want to be sad because I just lost someone that's dear to me, then that's my business, and I decide what happens. And that's the moment when Oneleet started.
That was like, yeah. It's so true. I feel like you just don't have the autonomy, and then it just gets to this tipping point where it's like final nail in the coffin. And also you're just like, I don't know. I always would get fearful when it was like my monetary potential was tied to a decision that somebody else was making for me. Like that just makes me internally uncomfortable. And so there's also that factor that I think plays into a lot of people. But sorry for your loss with the cat. I understand that feeling. I know how that goes, but heart is out to you on that piece. I would a question that's okay. So you started this, and then Cody is throwing the numbers out of how ridiculous you guys are, how quickly you're growing. So from my understanding, it went from like 0 to 7 million ARR in around, is it like 20 months or something like that? Is that kind of in the ballpark? Insane. Right. So talk to me about tactical stuff. Like what has been the biggest drivers or the things that, or what I'm always trying to challenge people to do with this stuff is like, how do you think about it as frameworks? Like what is this thing that we identified and then turned into a repeatable process? I think so often people are like, oh yeah, we figured out how to hack Reddit this one time and it got all these signups. And it's like, that's super cute. Like, how do you do that every day or every week or every month type of deal? So I'm curious, those things that you've employed to keep that absolutely insane growth. Also, I don't think people understand a lot of the times how fast that is. That is more than 30% compounding month over month. Like to do that, like effectively, like you're probably growing in the range of 45% is what I would guess, which is just, that means that every 2 months you're more than doubling, which is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's totally. So awesome. First off, that's amazing. But I'm curious to hear kind of those things what were like the early things you discovered, and then what did that evolution look like that turned you into where you guys are currently?
Yeah, so the journey was quite unconventional, I would say. Very early on, when we got into Y Combinator, the play was just penetration testing. It's very manual. There's quite a bit of automation you can introduce there. So that was what we were going for. And like most people, when they get into YC, you try to make a tiny bit of money. That's enough validation to get in. But in reality, you have no fucking clue what you're doing. And you have yet to validate if what you're doing
even at any level. We're just like playing jazz and making it up as we go, honestly. But sorry,
exactly.
didn't mean to cut you off.
And then you have these investor meetings where you're like, yeah, this is the thing we're going for. And nobody has any fucking clue. So I went in just like that. And I always feel like I have a very hard time lying to myself. So I remember when I just got into YC, I went to this retreat where all these founders meet each other, and everybody looked busy and they were like playing business. And I was just standing there with my drink to the side. I was like, why are all these people so busy? I think they're all very successful and I'm this loser here. What am I doing? And later I just discovered that it's this game that everybody plays and everybody's just equally clueless. There's just so much to figure out. So what happened was I had this discussion with my co-founders. This was like 1 or 2 months into YC. And we had this idea for one of two things. We were like, okay, we got to launch something to the community. And we had 2 ideas. It was basically, we either just do penetration testing. We don't automate anything. We just do this as a service. And if it sticks, we'll figure out the automation part later. Alternatively, and that's really what I wish existed before I started this company, was a sort of cybersecurity roadmap that companies can follow so that they know exactly what they should be putting in place to become secure. At the end of the day, what I used to hear from many CISOs in my job was, I don't know what I don't know. Where do I put my dollars? Guide me. So I would do this for a lot of companies. So the idea was productizing that. We literally flipped a coin. An hour before we had a call with one of our partners. It was pen testing. We launched. We were like, okay, we got to do pen testing. It worked. Not amazing. We were like, okay, so nobody gives a shit about security. Damn. Okay, what now? You know what? I think a lot of people go through this compliance thing, but yeah, compliance sucks. Compliance is for charlatans, right? Because it's fake security. Yeah. Are we going to do this or not? You know what? Maybe. Let's try it out. Pen testing for SOC 2. Just add a stupid little word. Suddenly it blew up. All of the YC community was like, yeah, we need this. We're going through SOC 2. We're on Vanta, Drata, Secure Frame, and the platform is great, but they don't take care of the pen test. So we would love it if you could do that. We grew to, I think, about $1 million in revenue just doing that in services. And we weren't building a platform or anything. We were a little bit scared of building anything. It took us about almost a year to hire our first engineer. We were like, let's learn. We got to talk to all these people. We got to guide them. Just keep talking, keep learning. So in that sense, I feel like we saw everybody go past us within YC. Everybody did like these big rounds and they were hiring left and right. We have 20 employees, 30. And it was just the 3 of us. And it felt very sad. And we questioned.
And you guys are in peak ZERP also. So everybody's raising these ridiculous rounds during that period. Like,
yeah. And we saw the cliff coming and we were like, I think this is our last chance. This is our last shot. We raised a decent round. I would say nothing spectacular, $2 million. And then we went to figure things out. And what ended up happening was all of these people that came for a pen test, they were going through compliance with Vanta Drata, and they started asking us questions about compliance on Slack. So it was like, hey, the auditor seems pretty clueless. How do we deal with this? And I'm like, let me get on a call with the auditor. And I would fight them. And they would be like, I can't find this thing in Vanta. And I didn't know either. And I was like, okay, show me and I'll try to help you out. And before we were helping all these companies with their whole journey. So it felt like we were their guide when it comes to compliance. And we jokingly called ourselves the Vanta help desk for a while. And I came to personally loathe the products that our clients were working with. And I felt, you know what? I'm a security purist. Compliance and security generally don't touch. They're like separate worlds. One cares about security. The other one cares about faking security. I was like, what if we inject security into the compliance world? Isn't that what people would really want?
That's the whole point too, right? Like, why are we going through this whole, you're just doing a dance that serves zero purpose. Besides the ability to go sell enterprise, you're not actually protecting yourself or them for any,
100%. So it was like, you know what? I think we got to do this. Like none of the CEOs in that space came from the security world. None of them cared about security. So there was this very clear opportunity in my mind to build a security.
None of the CEOs that are in these incumbents came from the security world. Like they're all just from compliance.
Yeah.
What are they doing there?
Some of them don't even come from compliance.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. I look at Vanta and I just see a sales organization. If you look at their headcount numbers, right? It's almost 4 salespeople for every engineer that they have on their team. Like, how is that keeping you safe when you think about that? They're not like deep engineering. Sorry, just to go off, it like drives me crazy because again, I feel like it's just like one of these things where they boxed out this market and they're just a marketing and sales organization at the end of the day. They're not actually providing like value or deep technology.
Yeah, it's actually what drove me insane. I kept seeing all these marketing things and these ads and people like raving about, Vanta is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And oh my God, it's going to become a unicorn, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what the fuck? It's fake. It's all fake. How are they growing this fast?
How is it fake? Just like if you take through like 3 bullet points of like, how is it fake so that other founders can understand what you mean when you say that?
So here's the thing. Whenever I, as a hacker, evaluate whether a company has their security in order or not, I don't look at a checklist. I don't go, do you have these 10 things in place? What I do essentially is I look for the holes and I don't care where they are. I look everywhere. What Vanta does is they have a checklist of, let's say, 50 things. And they're like, hey, did you do the 50 things? Yay, now you're secure and you have this certification. And there's another 50 things that you should be doing that are not on the list. And if you had known, then you might not have been breached. So that's where it goes sideways. And to make matters worse, when you build a company around compliance and practically nobody within that company has any security knowledge, what happens is that people start misinterpreting all of these checklist items that you have, and then it's passed off to auditors.
And the purpose they serve, not actually they look at it as an item on a list that they have to cross off rather than this is the purpose that it's serving the business for whatever that is, protection, etc.
Exactly. And then it goes off to some auditor who studied finance, not IT. They have no idea about IT. You have to explain it to them, and they often recommend stupid things because 10 years ago, their former manager handed them a checklist and told them this is how you interpret things. And now they're using that outdated knowledge to prescribe companies how to do things. So left and right, you have this.
They're not even practitioners is basically what you're saying. They're managers. They're not practitioners that are actually in the weeds of what's going on in this.
Exactly. Most of these people barely touch a computer. So it's super ironic to me. And then when I say these people are auditors mostly, it's super ironic to me that the industry works the way it does. In a way, it's frustrating because there are things that we can't change. We can't change the auditor part because they're independent third parties and these frameworks have been around forever. But you have to get creative. You have to find a way to solve this because if you don't, the experience just stays crappy. And that's really what we aimed to solve, not just the platform part, because honestly, if you just want to solve that part, you could have said, you know what, we'll just build a slightly better checklist, one that does actually point out what you should be doing, and one where, as a company, you do provide the correct interpretation. But we felt like even then, you're still reliant upon 10 external vendors, third parties that provide separate components that all are of mixed quality. Some of them might be great. Some of them will suck. And what usually happens is that if one of them sucks, the whole thing is going to suck. It's just imagine, I don't know, you go to a gym and the equipment is great and the location is great. And then you get a shitty personal trainer, right? It's like, how are you going to have a good experience? It's just going to suck, right?
So 100%, you're not going to accomplish the goal that you're actually trying to accomplish. Just because you have, I don't know, the raw materials doesn't mean that you can fabricate a car or something. Just use another analogy for it.
You have to solve the experience.
Totally. I know you guys are way quicker from a product differentiation standpoint. What are some of the other things that you've done? So just for to put hard numbers on it, Vanta, I believe it takes 3 to 6 months for completion. What does your guys' turnaround time look like to pass these?
It really depends on what clients are trying to get out of working with us. But one of the things we optimize very heavily for is that founders get on a call with us and they tell us we want to start tomorrow, that we can. We have the bandwidth internally. We have all these penetration testers and security experts that are available. And on the one hand, we don't want to optimize for speed alone because that can actually hurt security. It tends to make people very careless and people start doing the bare minimum when you try to do everything just purely for speed. So we always try to find a mix between, okay, we can go fast, but you are going to have to make sacrifices. We never tell people we're the fastest platform. On Vanta, you would spend 40 hours and with us, you would spend 30. Sometimes we tell them, look, on Vanta, you would spend 40. With us, you're going to spend 60. You know why? Because you're going to have to do 5 times as much work. If we would have given you the exact same thing as Vanta, we could have done it faster than them. But the reality is security requires doing difficult things. It requires that you start running your company in a different way. And we can't do that for you. You can only build your company and we can guide you. That's all we can do. But at the end of the day, the work is yours. So we're always super honest and transparent about that, which is also something that's really a thing that resonates very well with our client base. And I don't know why the competition hasn't caught on to this, like pushing them, being aggressive. It disgusts people.
I just think they don't understand who they're selling to. Like they're selling to engineers, right? Like engineers, that's the last thing that they want to interact with is a sales individual that's using like high pressure tactics. That's just trying to hit a quota. But if you're like, yo, no, I'm trying to be helpful and I have way more knowledge than you about this thing, I think that is like a part of the biology of the engineering ecosystem. And so when you can portray that as like company values, they're going to be more receptive. Like who are they going to choose to work with? You or the dude that's obsessed with the Buffalo Bills, right? Of course, they're going to choose you. That's like playing PUBG on your off hours with your co-founders talking about random tech stuff. Like, so anyway, that's a no brainer, but I Kobe's shown me some of the stuff that you guys have done from, I think it's such a brilliant way how you're approaching your marketing and distribution, punching up to a large competitor or an incumbent. Because if they punch down, it does two things, right? It like negatively puts them in the light of, okay, why are they punching down on this little guy, which is this like psychological component. But simultaneously, it makes them, if they do say anything, it brings attention to you. And then also like another component of it that's happening is that while like, as soon as they confirm that this is actually a competitor, then it invalidates them, right? So like all these things are happening. So the best thing that they can do is ignore you, but they're not going to ignore you because they are, again, coming from a sales and marketing component, they're probably manager types rather than being founder led. Talk to me about how you landed on that strategy and what have you seen be successful? I know you did this Reddit post that absolutely blew up. We'll try to find it and include it in the show notes so people can go and see it. It's so fucking gangster. I saw it and I was like, this is amazing. But anyway, any other of these tactical things that you've used to differentiate and position yourselves against these people or these companies that are already huge competitors within these markets?
Yeah. It does take a gradual approach. I think if you start punching up too early and you're basically the crazy guy in the town square just yelling into the void. So that's something we definitely wanted to avoid. And before I go into the tactics, there's another fun part of this whole journey that I would like to highlight, which is going into compliance was actually a very risky shot because none of the people we spoke to that were in Vanta got a secure FM. They all seemed to be happy. We were like, hey, what do you think about these products? Yeah, it's great. It's amazing. So we talked to somebody at YC, one of our partners, and he was like, oh, are you really sure? Because people seem to be really happy with Vanta and maybe you need to find something very niche, something very narrow. And then like, maybe you're too ambitious. This is too ambitious for a first company. Maybe just find a hair on fire problem and solve that. And I was like, hell no, we're going all in. We're going broad. It was a bet. And at the time we were selling pen tests very well. Our CTO at the time, he was like, why are we doing this? I thought we were going to capture pen testing first and then expand. And I was like, no, we're going to triple our ACV right now. We're going to sell something we haven't built yet. And if we can find 10 people in the next month that are willing to buy because they think what we're going to build is superior, then that's all we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I had
You're almost taking like a bootstrapper's mindset to a venture-backed company, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
We're doing this right now. We're building this company called Landing Cat. And my co-founder and I, Max, we just like basically just build products, spin them out and put people in place to have them run and then just move on to the next one. But it's basically AI powered programmatic SEO for e-commerce stores. So like, why is Etsy $1 billion company, right? It's because they build 15 million landing pages that are related to all the products and all the cross sections. So basically the software that we built and uses AI to enable us to do that. But for these mid-tier companies where they have maybe 10,000 SKUs and they want to go and create 50,000 different landing pages. Yeah. But I sold it to our first customers before we even had a product built. Max pieced it together over a 48-hour window. And at that point, we pushed it live and we're like, I think that same mindset. I find it fascinating when you take these bootstrapping ideologies, and I don't even like to call it that. I call it like self-funding, right? Because that's actually what's happening here. It's like we own other companies and we're cash flowing this into these other things, right? But when you take those principles and you apply it into venture, I don't think people understand the amount of growth that can happen. And that knows like when you employ those strategies and those tactics, because if it can work with like limited and tight resources, think what happens when you have basically unlimited resources from time, money, and mental energy. So anyway, we kind of digress there, but I just want to throw that out there for the audience to think about. I think there's an opportunity if you go and you have raised a ton of money, which is a part of this audience, like go and look at what these self-funded people are doing and be like, yo, how can I clone this, employ it, implement it within my company? But then I'm going to layer on whatever, $1 million in ad spend to this thing that is working or whatever that ends up being to make this grow even more effectively than if I was doing it on the self-funded route. But
yeah, exactly. And I think the beauty of what we're doing at Oneleet is that it's a compound play. So whatever we build, it all works together. So the idea was always that if the second thing would fail, we would always have the first thing that was still running in the background. So every single thing we do, it will always be there and provide value. And we always have everything else to fall back on. And that was really how we de-risked it to ourselves, because it wasn't like we're going to completely forget about penetration testing. And now it's all about this one thing. And we all are paid a lot. At the time, we weren't paid anything. We basically decided not to have a salary at all. Our funding was just sitting in the bank. We were making money with penetration testing. And we're like, we're going to do this thing on top of it.
Basically. Like you have cash
Yeah.
that you're sitting on, you have a war chest, but you're basically running this like a profitable company is what it sounds like.
100%. We actually raised about 1.9 million. It was at about when we got to 2.1 or 2.2 that we were like, okay, yeah, I think we got to start paying ourselves also. It's been long enough. We got to live off of something.
Totally.
Hired a few people. And ever since, it's just been fluctuating. One month, it's slightly below where we were when we just did our fundraise. And some months were slightly above. And that's how we justified every single expense. But I digress as well. We were getting to
this is, I think, super valuable because people don't talk about these components, right? Like, how do you think about the financials of this when you're in like a rapid growth rate? And I think that what you just said is a very valuable thing to think about. Like, can I raise this money and then get that number to flatline? Like, it doesn't have to grow. Like, our bank balance doesn't have to grow. Actually, if it is growing, you're probably doing something wrong, right? Like, you should be spending as much money as you're bringing in or more if you're trying to even like increase again at a venture scale. So I think that again, people don't talk about that specific thing. They're like, oh, how do I put this into my bank account? It's no, like actually what you're thinking about is like, how can I create more value in this company? Once you start to see that ceiling, then it's a different game, right? But if you see that growth curve continue to go up and you're not at that inflection point where that ceiling is starting to occur, like every dollar, my biggest regrets are we saw that this ad channel was producing $1 signups and that same ad channel is now $7. My biggest regret I think about on a daily basis is I should have spent every dollar that I had at that point to go into that rather than parlaying it or even testing new things. I think that this is this thing that founders, like, again, as anybody that's built a company, they've had this challenge of like shiny object syndrome and getting distracted by these things. And they're like, oh, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And in reality, if we just focused on this thing that was working right now and did more of that and less of what isn't, we'd actually probably grow faster, right?
Yeah, 100%. Also, the way I always think about funding is, and this philosophy kind of changes per stage. I think that once we do our Series A, we're planning on doing a sort of Series B sized Series A. But once that happens, things will radically change because I do intend on burning suddenly. There's just quite a bit of expense. There's a ton of stuff I want to pour money into. But at this stage, I feel like you should view money as a sort of buffer. It's always supposed to be the case that whatever you pour money into, it dips, but you should already from day one start seeing it like rebound. If you don't see that, you need to pull back and rethink, should I be spending on this? Because the moment you're seeing this happen, it's basically, it's a countdown to death. And we were like, you know what? We're never going to get there. We don't have to necessarily be default alive from day one, but we need to be able to, if we pull away, it should immediately flatline again. And that's basically how we de-risk everything, how we can keep this company alive indefinitely. So yeah, I think many founders
I just want to repeat that, like one of the mantras that I always say on this, and it's like, you're just trying to not die. Like that is all this game is. Like if you can survive long enough, that's actually how you win. And if you look at biology, it's a great example of this. It's like the winners didn't win. They just didn't die. Why does that bird have whatever, the beak shape that it does? The reason is because it just didn't die. And that's the reason that it won, right? I think it's counterintuitive to think about that. Like winners, losers, actually winners just survive longer. And that's your goal as whether you're venture funded, whether you're self-funding, whatever that ends up being, just in the back of your mind, just can we last longer than our competitors? Can we just survive for a longer period?
And the distractions are real. I think this is really where it goes sideways. People get distracted by VC telling them you should be spending on this, you should be spending on that. And they see people post things on LinkedIn and Twitter and they're like, I need to do this too. And people get so distracted from the core activities and just building the amazing product, building the amazing company, going out there and talking to people. And I think that is what almost always happened whenever you talk to a founder was like, I'm this close to dying because we spent it all. When I asked them, did you hire a ton of people? Yeah. Like how much product did you build? Often too late, too little. It's always the same symptoms, I would say. And it's a real shame because if they had done it slightly differently, if they had held back, learned more lessons, they would have probably still been alive.
Totally. 100%. And it's that conservativeness. There's a balance with it again, but like how you're approaching it, it's okay, we're going to raise a huge round. That's our growth round. And we need to expand as quickly as you can. But you also have those systems and those processes in place so that when you actually have those resources, you can go and deploy those. So anyway, it's the tactical things. But to get back to the initial, I want to be respectful of your time. So I would love to just go and have you here's all of the tactical things that we're seeing on the front lines. I know my audience, like that's what they live for, is these are the things that we've seen work. And we'll leave the last segment for that if you're open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. What really worked for us within Oneleet was leverage the community, make few people extremely happy enough that they start recommending others to work with you and build a culture around that. I think that some spaces are really ripe for disruption. And one of the ways to recognize that, I think, is if you feel personally as an expert in a field that you see things the right way and others are seeing it the wrong way. Like in my case, I'm a security guy. I care about real security. These other companies are about fake security. You need to make noise. You need to go all out. The moment you have that first amount of validation that people like it, you need to spread it. You need to multiply it. There's 5 people who love this. They need to leave reviews left and right, and they need to tell their friends, and you need to be aggressive about it. You need to call the fakers out. I think one of the mistakes that people also make is that when they start a company, they start playing CEO. And what does a CEO do? They speak very properly, and suddenly it's like formal language, and it's what? No, talk like a human, tell it how it is, call people out. If you think that others are bullshitting and you can articulate why
and show the data,
and that resonates, then you have something magical. And all you have to do is keep repeating that over and over. And that's really what happened with us within the YC community. At first, we got a few reviews. A whole bunch of people were still very scared of working with us. I was like untested very early, but they loved the philosophy. They were like, yeah, you know what? I was on Vanta and I did feel like it was just this checklist. I want to get security right. I want to work with you guys. If they have a good experience, you use that validation to make it slightly less risky for the next person to come along. And if you keep doing this, you reach this tipping point where it's actually likelier for anybody to come to you than to go to competitor. Whereas before it used to be a fight and it was all about you would spend ridiculous numbers of hours making these people happy. Like not literally, but if you had to, you would go to their home and it's, hey, man, if you want security, fine, but I'll also clean your kitchen. I'll do whatever you want to make you happy. Just do whatever the fuck it takes. So we did that. It resonated really strongly. And there was this moment where we realized...
it sounds like it's testimonials driven, just to get down into the... So it's testimonials driven. Are you putting ad spend behind that? Or like, how are you getting that so that it's seen by people? Like the word of mouth thing, I think for everyone, though, yeah, of course, word of mouth is great. But I feel for a lot of people that don't understand that you can actually magnify word of mouth and you can instigate word of mouth. You can get that to happen within these companies and within these communities. Could you talk about what are you doing that you're seeing work to amplify that?
Yeah, one of the things that really worked for us is be wherever people talk about this. Especially within compliance, people have a ton of questions about, hey, who should we go for? Why? What components? What price? Etc. Give your honest opinion. Always get involved in these conversations. And if you tell these people, look, if you get on a call with me, I will guide you through it all. I won't try to sell to you. I think that's also a really big component. You need people to be willing to get on a call with you. The moment they smell that you're trying to sell to them, it's whoa. Yeah, no, thank you. But if they truly feel like, oh, this guy is really trying to help, and I'm very comfortable telling people, like, don't go with us. Go with one of the competitors. And if you have that...
It's such a powerful sales tactic. And that is not talked about is, we're not a good fit. If you just say that, like I've gotten more referrals from that alone than anything else because they're like, oh, they're not just doing this for the money. It's actually, can I provide value? Right.
Exactly. Many of the people that get on calls with us, they say, yeah, I'm getting quotes from Vanta, draw a secure frame. They're trying to push me to sign by end of day. And I tell them like, let's take a step back. Do you need this right now? And then we have a conversation and it turns out like, no, these guys are too early. Don't give them money, but don't give us money either. Keep your money. Maybe we have another chat in 6, 9 months, whatever, when the time is right. And then suddenly these people feel like, holy shit, these guys actually care. And I do. I want these people to succeed. And I hate it when people get sold to without them needing it. And I think one of the side effects of that is that when people do actually come to work with you, that it's much more likely that they come out happy. And that they will recommend you and they will tell all of their friends, just have a chat with Bryan or somebody from his team. They won't try to sell you. They're just going to tell you how it is. And that at some point got so big that we became the #1 compliance platform within YC. And we share that space with Vanta. And we became increasingly aggressive and bold, and we just called them out whenever. And
do you look for that? Do you look for people talking about that on Twitter or for anytime that like looking for that on Reddit? It's like, are you in that deep in it? And then your team then it gets sent out in an internal Slack and everybody's supposed to go and vote this response. Are you doing that level of tactical thing or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so at first we just used to have this alert thing within the YC community. They have this internal forum called Bookface, and every time somebody mentioned SOC 2, I would get an email. It was only about 2 months ago that we felt like, you know what, we need to start replicating this outside of YC. And it's exactly what you said. We had alerts on Reddit, Twitter, Hacker News. So whenever somebody mentioned any of our competitors or whenever they would mention SOC 2 or whatnot, we would know to jump in. And honestly,
Show
like
up.
I would say, just we only show up like 10 or 20% of the time because there's just so much coming in and we need to find more bandwidth. But there's already been so much business that came out of that. And what's interesting is that we only started spending money on ads pretty recently. And I think that those ads have not converted directly. But what you do see is that when you speak to these people in these communities like Reddit or Hacker News, they've seen you pop up here or there. And then when they see that recognition, when they see you talk about it, that's when it activates. It's, oh, wait, yeah, I have seen these guys before.
Totally.
And that's really where the magic comes in. And that's working extremely well for us. It's honestly actually where a lot of that growth just last month comes from. And the messaging has been massive for us as well.
No, for sure. I feel like that brand touch, it's for you guys, it's going to be such a brand game. Like you're not going to be able to cannibalize like Vanta searches. It's like, how do I make people search directly for Oneleet? They end up on the site, right? So I don't know. Again, I was talking to Cody and he's like, yeah, we've just been like, we took all of our target audience, put them into a remarketing audience. And so constantly, anytime they're online, right, we're showing up in front of them, which allows for us to basically, and then to that point of, hey, we've seen this ad 7 times. Maybe it's in their subconscious, but then they're asking this question on Reddit. Suddenly they get a response from one of the co-founders or whatever that ends up being. Like that's a huge touch, right? When you think about that from like a sales journey all the way down, from a marketing journey all the way down. So I think that's brilliant what you guys are doing on that. And then also that relates to, okay, if you start doing cold email and all of these other pieces, you're getting, again, these touches that are happening. So it's less of a cold lead that you're reaching out to. It's more of a warmer introduction that's beginning. But again, I know we're just running up on time. This has been amazing. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, and any other things that you want to shout out?
Yeah, so find me on Twitter. Just search for Bryan Onel. You'll find me. It's the guy talking shit about the competition. Pretty easy. Oneleet.com is our website. If you are ever shopping around for anything compliance or security related, feel free to reach out. Always happy to have a chat, even if you're not very actively shopping. Yeah, that's it really.
Amazing. Bryan, thank you for coming on. We'll include all of that within the show notes as well. And yeah, thank you again.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. And let's do this again sometime.
I would love it, man. We'll have you back on soon. I want to talk in 6 months where you guys are at. It's going to be a ridiculous ARR number. I already know.
Sounds good. Will do. Awesome. Thank you so much, Cody.
Thank you, Bryan.